So thank you everyone for joining today's session. So we're gonna cover Figma Fast Tracks, accelerating your design prototypes. I'm happy to share some tips I personally find very helpful in my professional journey, and I think it will also be beneficial for you guys, especially for the upcoming Protothon. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Mingzhi, but you can just call me Ming. I'm a product designer currently at Mastercard with a focus on design system and visual design. So I consider myself as a design generalist. So I have experience and skills across various design verticals. For the recent years, I've been focusing on enterprise products as well as design systems. So I've shared a few design resources onto Figma community as well as Medium. And you should also be able to find me on ADP list. So today, this is agenda. We're going to cover 3 topics. First is responsive design. I'm going to talk about some foundation. And then the second one is components. I will talk about how to build a responsive component as well as how to leverage different component properties. Lastly, I'm going to share some fast design tips. So I plan to leave 10 minutes in the end for the Q&A. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So I guess in the end, we'll address those questions by the chronological order. So we can start with responsive design. First, I'd like to talk about the differences between those common grouping options, such as group, frame, and auto layout. So you can actually identify the layer type by looking at the leading icon in the layers panel. So here we have the classic group and frame, and here we also have the section. But actually section is kind of excluded from design. So it's basically used to organize your design artifacts, mainly for design handoff. So it's not involved in prototyping at all. And here for those icons, these are auto layout, but they have different alignment. And for the last one, it is absolute position, which is part of auto layout. We can start with group. So the characteristic of group is that the dimension of the parent group is actually determined by its child layers. So here's a quick demo. So when you move a child element around, you can see the boundary of the parent adjusts accordingly. But like frame is kind of the opposite of group, because the parent layer will always be fixed, which means you can easily remove a child element or add a new one while keeping the parent frame the same. So it enables you to quickly add a new element into the existing frame simply by drag and drop without breaking the whole thing. And then for auto layout, it is basically a multi-layer structure where the inner layers can kind of follow the behavior of the outer layer or vice versa. So the behavior of auto layout is highly contingent upon the resizing options. So here are a few examples. So first example is when we set the parent to be fixed width and the child to be fixed width as well. So in this demo, you can see the parent is fixed and the child is also fixed. So in this case, when you duplicate to create more child elements, you can see the parent layer stays the same. For the second combination, we have parent to be fixed and the child is set to fill container. And this way, when you duplicate to have more child elements, you can see it kind of shrink to fill the parent's frame. And when you adjust the parent frame, you can see the child elements kind of grow to fill the new frame as well. For the last example, the parent is set to hug contents while the child is fixed. In this case, if you duplicate, you have more child elements, you can see the frame of the parent will adjust accordingly. And then I'm going to cover two other concepts. One is constraints within a frame, and the other is its counterpart, which is the absolute position in auto layout. So constraints basically allow you to fix a child element relatively to a certain point of the parent frame. So we have different combinations here. For the red one, the constraints are set to left and top, which means the location is relatively fixed to the top left corner of this parent frame. And for the purple one, it is set to be center and center, which means it will be fixed relatively to the center of the frame. So if you look at this demo, when you adjust the parent frame, the relative position of these child elements stay unchanged. And another two constraints are left and right and scale. For left and right, it means the distance between the child element and the parent frame is the fixed value, while scale means the proportion of this child element to the parent frame is a fixed percent. So there's a slight difference in this demo, as you can tell. So absolute position actually works very similarly as constraints. Absolute position is within auto layout, but like by default, constraints are not available in auto layout. But you can simply apply absolute position to a child element within auto layout. This way you can kind of walk around the rules and the limitation of auto layout, and then allow that child element to behave just like they have constraints. So you can see this demo is basically identical to the previous one, but this one, it is actually happening within the auto layout. So the common use case of absolute position can be those status indicators. For this one, it is like an on-read indicator. For this one, it can be an active indicator. So here's a summary of when to use these different grouping types. For a group, I think it allows you to create something within a flexible boundary. So you can create something like an illustration using group. So it's actually very flexible to adjust the details of the illustration without like breaking the whole thing. And then for frame, it allows you to create within a fixed boundary. For example, we can have like a feature image as part of a card, and it has a fixed resolution. And by using frame, it allows you to create within that fixed resolution. And for auto layout, it allows you to create a pattern with stacked elements, like a card view or a list view. Sometimes these elements can be highly repetitive. For absolute position, it allows you to fix items within that pattern with stacked elements. So it can be an on-read indicator inside an icon, as I previously mentioned. Here it comes the second topic, components and properties. We're gonna demo how to build a responsive component and also how to leverage those component properties. So first we can start with building a responsive component. So basically what we're gonna do is to apply auto layout from the inner layer to the outer layer so that they can be altogether responsive. So here's a step-by-step demo. We're going to create a responsive card in this case. So first we can group this image layer as well as the distance label in an auto layout. However, I like to fix this distance label at a certain location by using the absolute position. And then make sure to right align it and button align it to fix it at this lower right corner. And then you need to change the resizing option of this image to be fill container so it can follow the outer frame. And double check the responsiveness. And then I'm going to group the profile, username, and this favorite icon using another auto layout. Make sure to change the text layer to be fill container to make sure it's responsive as well. And then on top of these layers, I'm going to wrap them into another auto layout layer. And make sure you set each of them to be fill container. It looks broken, but it's actually working properly. And here for the title layer, actually you can, for the image layer, you need to make sure the vertical resizing option is set to fill container as well, so it can be vertically responsive. But like for the title layer, you can set the height to be hug contents, so it will enable multiple lines. And now it's vertically responsive. Okay, it's time to convert it to be a component using this shortcut. And lastly, you can have a final touch by changing the corner size to be 8. Okay, then that's it. We've designed this component. And then since we've already created a component, we are able to apply those different component properties. So we can start with the text property. It is pretty self-explanatory. You can apply this property to all of these text layers. So when you duplicate this component, you are able to edit those texts simply within those input fields. And for next property, it is called Boolean property. It allows you to hide or show a certain element with the toggle. So in this case, I'm going to apply this property to this distance label as well as this favorite icon. You need to navigate to this layers section. And then when you duplicate this component, you should be able to hide that two elements. And then we have instance swap property. So sometimes we nest a instance within the component, and you should be able to swap that instance with any other components available locally or in other libraries. And here you can select that instance first and then navigate to this instance section to apply that property. Yeah, the great thing about this property is that you can actually curate a list of alternative options by clicking this button. So for example, I'm going to pick a list of alternative icons you can swap this instance to. And then when you duplicate this property, when you duplicate this component, you should be able to find those alternative options in this drop-down menu. And then we have variant property. So we've previously talked about the Boolean property, the instance swap property, and the text property, but sometimes you want to represent a small difference that cannot really be represented by those previous properties. Then it's a time when you need a variant property. So it can be used for small differences like size, fill, effect, stroke, etc. And in this case, I'm going to demo how to create a variant property for a difference in ratio. So first, you need to duplicate to create a variant. So I'm going to name that property to be ratio. And then this property has a default value, which is called default. So this variant is called default. And then for this one, I'm going to create that variant with a different ratio. I'm going to make this a square. And then you need to adjust resizing to make it more responsive. And then I'm going to give it a value called 1-to-1. And then you are able to select between these two options. And then we have nested instance. Sometimes like within this component, you actually have a instance and there are some existing properties applied to that instance already. And if you want to leverage those properties without duplicating efforts, you can actually choose to expose the properties from that nested instance. In this case, we can see there's an enable property applied to this favorite icon. However, that enable property is not really available at this card level. So you can actually choose to expose that property from this favorite icon by just selecting it. And then now you can access that enable property and simply configure it at this card level without drilling down. Cool. So now we have that component designed, and it's time to fill the content. Here is a couple of plugins that I recommend when you work with content. So it can make your mockup a bit more realistic than those Lorem Ipsum. So here is a demo of how you can leverage Content Reel. Content Reel is basically a collection of different placeholder content, but it's definitely more realistic. It has text, images, icons, etc. So to apply it, you can simply just select a specific layer and then click a content you want to leverage. So here you can apply a username, a user profile, and also probably find a feature image. And then it's done. The reason we recommend using components is because it comes with a lot of convenience. So here are a couple. So here's a demo where we already leverage this component and complete the design of this screen. And now you can actually apply the change to all those cards by simply change the master component. So it can actually cascade the modification to all of its instances. So here, let's say I want to change the corner radius from 8 to 20. And then you can change the master component and immediately it is applied to the all of these instances. And then another thing that can be carried over to those instances is the interaction. So we can see in this card, there's a favorite icon, and it is also everywhere within those instances. So we can actually go to this favorite icon and then apply the interaction. And immediately all the instances become interactive. Okay, then that's the end of the second part. Now here comes the last part, which is the fast design tips. So I'm going to give you a few tips on how to leverage some shortcuts to make bulk changes. So we can start with something very basic, like copy and paste. As a designer, I think we usually work with content a lot. And sometimes we work with content designers as well. Because we are controlling the layout and the styles, so we don't want our styles to be overridden when we are updating the content. So let's say if we want to replace the content B with content A, if you simply just copy paste content A, then it will actually it will override the font style. But what if you use this kind of shortcut? You can actually paste without the format. So you will not really override any existing styles. And then sometimes I think you do want to copy paste certain styles. And here's another example. So here we have like a styled circle versus a plain circle. The styled circle has multiple attributes, for example, fill, stroke, and several effects. And for the plain one, it only has a gray fill. You can actually copy paste a certain attributes simply by selecting it. And then you can use Command C and V to paste that style to this circle. But what if you find it's too slow and you want to make it more efficient? Actually, you can copy and paste all the attributes just at once. So in this case, you can actually select this styled circle and use this shortcut, which is Option Command C, and then you can copy the attributes all together. And then using Option Command V, you can paste all those attributes all together. And what's best about it is actually it can be applied to another vector regardless of the shape. So this will definitely save you a lot of time. I think in our daily work, we also encounter the situation where we probably need to update a certain design element across many screens. Sometimes it can be hundreds of screens. In that case, it's actually very important for us to understand how to use those bulk actions. So here's an example I find very essential. So this is called paste to replace. And here we have a bunch of circles and squares. Like what if I want to replace those squares with circles? So first I need to select the circle and then copy it to your clipboard. And then I want to select all the squares. You can simply start with selecting the first square and then use this feature called select all with the same properties. And then suddenly all the squares are selected. And then just by using this shortcut, you should be able to replace all the squares at the same time with the same location. And now it's done just by one click. And then here comes the last set of design tips regarding bulk action as well. So the first one is called multi-edit, which is a feature released earlier this year. So it allows you to select all the matching layers at once. So here, let's say we have like a onboarding flow and multiple screens has the same button, but you want to update the copy on the button from next to confirm. And in this case, there are several ways to achieve the same result. First, you can select this component, and then by clicking this button, called Multi-Edit, you should be able to select all the buttons at the same time with next on it. And then because they are already components, so you can actually leverage the text property. Here, you should be able to edit the text altogether from next to confirm. Simple and easy. And then alternatively, instead of like selecting the entire button, you can just select the text layer. And then by hitting the multi-edit button, you should be able to select all the text layers. And then by hitting the return key, you should be able to activate the editing mode. And then you can edit all these selected text layers all together. And then it's updated. For the next one, it's again using the selecting all with same variant feature. So you can select this button and then use that feature again. But this one is not as accurate as the multi-edit feature. So it means you have to, in this case, manually deselect the first button because it's not the same. And then because you've already selected all those buttons, you should be able to update the copy again altogether. Lastly, I think this one may be the easiest one for this case. If you want to update the copy within a certain component, you can actually just search for that copy and replace it with another one. In this case, you can navigate to the left panel using this search and replace feature, type in where do you want to replace, and then replace it with confirm. And it's done. Okay, that's all the tips I have for you guys today. And here's a list of Figma educators I personally find very helpful in my learning journey. And I think the official learning resources from Figma are also very helpful. So you can find those content on their YouTube channel, Help Center, as well as those user-generated content on Figma community. So that's all I have to share. I'm open for your questions.
Yeah, you guys can also utilize the Q&A part of the Zoom to ask any questions. I think we already had one question earlier in your talk. Someone asked, do you keep all master components in a separate Figma page? That's in the chat.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, actually I do. Like for this talk, I have all those materials for the demo here, as well as like a set of components. I think that's also a best practice for people managing a design system. We have like a dedicated Figma file for all those components for our design system.
I was wondering if you could show us the page for resources again.
For which resource? Okay, I see. Of course.
The Figma educators. Thank you. Thanks.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
We also have another question from a UX student from UW. Do you think as a new grad, we have to have a project related to design system to get the position that has a relative requirement?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would say usually as students, it's kind of difficult for you guys to have experience with design system because I think it's usually those large organizations that use design system most often because it's very beneficial for them to, let's say, accelerate their implementation process and also keep up the consistency across their product suite. But like for students, usually the type of projects you have access to is more I would say smaller scope and also like independent rather than like part of like a large product suite. So sometimes it can even be I would say counterproductive if you spend too much time on design system. But I would say that it's definitely like beneficial for you to start with those design system fundamentals, and then just start from there. You can start with like building components and then create a patterns and see how that can help with collaboration within your design team. I think that's a great starting point. Like even though you don't really have access to the front end team to help you build the entire library for design as the design system, I think as long as you have knowledge regarding the design side of it, it is helpful for your job hunting because for most of the positions, they don't really require you to have skills with building design system, but I think they require you to have skills to leverage existing components or understand how the design system works on a high level. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Cool. Another question, how often is a design system updated?
I would say it depends on the pace of the organization, and also the scope, the size of the projects and the scale of the organization. If the organization is smaller, I would say it's easier for them to adopt an agile process, and it will be faster for them to update the design system.
Cool. Someone asked, do you use this to onboard new members in your team as well?
You mean design system? Yes, of course. I mean, it's very important to help the new joiners understand there's a design system to leverage and also how the design system works. Because usually for a design system, we kind of like bridge the design team as well as the engineering team. So for new joiners, it's essential for them to understand what components are available in the design system for them to leverage. Meanwhile, I think it's also helpful for them to understand the design system from the technical standpoint so that they understand like which like going to which route can help speed up the implementation versus which is like more time consuming.
Awesome. Someone asked, do you recommend Figma or Google Slides to present slide decks for projects?
Personally, I prefer Figma for sure because you can actually apply more interaction within the deck. And for this presentation, interestingly, I've applied the interaction for those videos. So all those demos, they are short videos, and I actually apply those interactions. So you can actually use those different keys in your keyboard to control how this video plays. So I would say it's very helpful, and because you can just play with those interactions and make your presentation super robust. I'm not sure if this is achievable in Google Deck, but probably not at this point. And I think meanwhile, you can also directly like put a an actual mock-up of your design within the deck and then show the interaction within that mock-up as well as part of the presentation. So I think if you want to show the static artifacts as well as the prototype, I think it's pretty handy to use Figma as a presentation tool.
Awesome. Do you think design token is crucial to design system?
Yes, of course. I think design tokens, they are the actual bridge between the front-end library and the design library within Figma. And because Figma is releasing new features, for example, like Code Connect, it's actually more it's much easier for engineers to implement those design inside the design system, inside the Figma file to their front-end library. So it's actually, it will help accelerating the process much more compared with previous process.
Someone asked, what mistakes do you see junior UX designers make in their first job?
I would say, I'm not sure about the first job, but like for junior designers or student designers, I think sometimes people are trying to solve a very big problem, but in real world, the piece of work you work with is actually with a very small scope because it's very small. You actually have the chance to explore many options and come up with more realistic solutions because you focus on the details. But as I think I can see a lot of examples among those students' works where they want to solve a very large problem and they want to design an entire application, and then they kind of just lose track of the details and they focus on super high level stuff. And then it's actually very difficult for them to propose design solutions in that case.
This kind of goes off of that. Someone asked, do you have any advice for job seekers?
For job seekers, I would say your work speaks for itself. So it's great. I think the best suggestion is still to focus on your craft first, especially when you are like a new grad, because for other skills, you can actually pick them up during your professional work. Like for junior students, for junior designers, if you have like a great craft skills, it's self-explanatory and it can help you stand out among other candidates.
Awesome. Someone also asked what tool you were using to get those commands showing up when you typed.
Oh, let me see. That's a great question. It's called Keycaster. I can type in.
Keycaster.
Yeah.
Someone said, is it possible for us to have access to this Figma file for practice?
Yes, I can just clean it up a little bit and then I can send it through a follow-up email or something.
So yeah, you can send it to me and then I'll put it on the website or send it on the Discord.
Of course.
Someone asked, I'm a marketing student who pivoted into product design. Do you have any tips on effective storytelling in junior case studies?
I would say for the storytelling, it's important for you to include all the thinking process. Like for example, there are different stages in a design process, right? But you don't, I would say it's not enough just to follow the design process. Now, sometimes it's not really realistic to follow the design process because in a real world, you encounter different limitations and constraints, and you need to respond to those different constraints with flexibility. So sometimes if you just follow the typical design process, it kind of, your case study kind of end up like those cookie cutter storytelling case study. But like, if you can include more details, for example, how you pivot from the first idea to the following idea, and who did you reach out to for feedback and validation, and how you change your mind during the process. Those stories, those details can make your narrative more real, and meanwhile can also showcase your logical thinking, critical thinking skills. So I would say just be more realistic about what the project actually was, and then tell the stories behind the scene.
We have someone asking, if I change the style for the existing design system, how do you adapt that for the engineer side?
Change the style of the existing design system. Usually, I would say that depends on what kind of company you work with. Different teams have different practice. I think for our company, that really requires a long approval process. Like you need to first propose that change and really provide the rationale behind that decision, like why it is essential, because sometimes a small change can be very impactful in a large organization. And then after we go through that approval process, we can break that work down to different technical tickets for the engineering team to pick up.
Cool. Somebody asked, do UXers mainly deal with what you just presented, or is this mainly a UI's role?
Sorry, what's the question again?
It's in the chat. Do UXers mainly deal with what you just presented, or is this mainly UI's role?
Yeah, I think these all those tips I've just shared are very helpful in my daily work. I don't think there's like a differentiation between UX designer versus UI designer in the US market. I would say for most of the companies, but like for certain companies, they do have a dedicated role, such as a visual designer or a UI designer for the UI part. But like for most of the product designer roles, we are in charge of both the UX and UI. So these tips are all very helpful in my daily work.
Well, someone asked, what qualities would you look for in a new grad for a UX design role? I think you kind of covered that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ability to learn and your craft.
And what level / standard of Figma expertise is expected of a junior UX designer in their first job?
I think that question is also kind of repetitive, right?
Could you share some quick best practices for handoffs?
For handoffs, I think you can, for example, leverage this feature within using section. For example, you can use section to group multiple frames, and then you can use this little icon here to label it as ready for dev. And then here you should be able to copy a dev link, and then you should be able to send this link to your dev team. And then I think if you toggle on the dev mode, you should be able to add very detailed annotation. Yeah, but I'm not sure if that's available in my subscription plan. Probably not.
Okay, this one's interesting. The development of design system brings a new era of UI, UX design. How do you see the next level of design system?
Yeah, I would say design system will be more robust for sure. And meanwhile, with those new features, it will be very helpful for both the design and the engineering team, and it will definitely speed up the implementation process. And because the implementation process is accelerated, it will also be much easier for other team, like the consumer of the product of the design system, to adopt those new components at a faster pace. So I would say that's definitely will be very helpful for the entire company.
Someone asked, what if the design system is not sufficient for the current design? For example, we need a new type of button, but it doesn't exist in the design system. How long does it take to supplement the design system at your company? What does that process look like?
I think I've also covered that question a little bit in a previous question. So basically, we should first raise that point to the design system team, and then we will have like a discussion to just justify that need. And then once it's approved, we will go through a discussion with the engineering team and then break that down to tickets.
Someone asked, besides Figma, what skills/tools do you suggest junior designers should or good to have?
I would say definitely like communication skill and your presentation/storytelling skills. And I would say the more senior you become, the more essential these skills become.
Someone's wondering if most of your work revolves around building design systems, or is it just part of your job as a UX designer?
I'm a part-time contributor to our design system. So on one side, I work on those enterprise products, but meanwhile, I also maintain our design system on a regular basis.
Do you recommend people try to find an industry they're interested in when they're starting out?
Yeah, I would definitely try the industry you are interested in first. Because you are interested in the industry, so it will be easier for you to learn the domain knowledge. And the better you understand the domain knowledge, the better you can design the products and the services.
Someone asked, how would you think AI will change the way you do design work? In what ways?
Currently, I don't really see a huge difference. I think when I work with the content and copy, I sometimes will ask help from ChatGPT, but I'm not seeing it is changing the workflow of UX design.
Awesome. I think we just have two more questions left. How do you communicate the impact of your design solutions for academic projects, given that they don't have hard constraints?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't really have that much experience with academic projects, but I feel like probably you can talk about the feedback from like your professors or any sort of target users. And then I think you can use their quote to validate your design solutions. And I'm not sure if the academic project is involved in like it's relevant with any sort of funding. So if you actually let's say raise any funding for that academic project, probably you can also use that as an indicator for your impact as well.
Well, do you think it's important to have experience with AI for people applying for entry-level roles?
I've heard that sometimes it can be counterproductive if you say you are super interested in AI, because your potential recruiter will consider you to be only interested in AI, then recruiters from non-AI companies probably will not consider you. So I would say be careful about what keywords to put on your resume.
Okay, I think we have another talk about to start in 5 minutes. So thank you so much for giving your talk. Thank you for everyone who participated. It was great to
Yeah,
have it.
thank you, everyone, and your questions. Thank you.
And I will have the recording uploaded shortly.
Yeah, and the recording can be found on YouTube,
Cool.
just for everyone asking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.